The invitation had arrived in a thick, cream-colored envelope with gold trim, elegant, tasteful, and exactly the kind of thing Emily's family would insist on. Her sister's wedding was going to be an event, not just a ceremony. The kind of affair with champagne fountains, string quartets, and a guest list packed with people who spent more time curating their social image than building genuine relationships. It was the kind of night where everything had to be perfect, where appearances mattered above all else. And I had no idea that behind the carefully arranged smiles and polished speeches, my marriage was already hanging by a thread. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. Emily had been on edge for weeks, caught up in the whirlwind of last-minute wedding chaos. At least, that's what she said every time I asked why she was so distracted. Every call she took in the other room, every text she quickly swiped away when I walked by. Just wedding stuff, she'd assure me. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. After all, this was her sister's big day, and if Emily had been distant lately, I chalked it up to stress. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to the details. The sudden late-night outings, the unexplained absences, the way she seemed irritated whenever I tried to get close. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just being paranoid. But the truth was I didn't want to dig too deep. I didn't want to find something I couldn't unsee. The wedding was being held at an upscale venue just outside the city. A sprawling estate with marble floors, chandeliers that probably cost more than my yearly salary, and a staff that moved with quiet efficiency. It was the kind of place designed to make people feel important, to create the illusion of a perfect life. But perfection was just that, an illusion. I arrived at the venue before Emily, who claimed she had things to take care of beforehand. That didn't seem odd at the time. She was part of the bridal party, and I assumed she was getting ready with the others. So I settled into the reception hall, making small talk, sipping on overpriced whiskey, and watching guests filter in, all dressed to impress. It wasn't until about an hour later that things started to feel off. Emily hadn't come to check on me, not even for a brief hello. I saw the bridesmaids flitting around the venue, laughing, adjusting their dresses, fixing makeup, but Emily was nowhere in sight. I texted her. No response. I asked a few people if they'd seen her, but all I got were vague answers. That's when a venue employee, a young guy with a nervous expression, approached me. "Excuse me, sir, are you with the bride's family?" he asked. "Sort of. I'm Emily's husband," I said, frowning at the unease on his face. He hesitated, shifting on his feet. I think you should see something, but I need you to stay calm." Stay calm? The words sent an icy ripple through my chest. I followed him through a hallway lined with antique paintings and up a staircase that led to the private suites. My mind raced with possibilities, but I wasn't prepared for what I was about to see. The employee stopped at a door and pointed to a small security monitor mounted on the wall outside the suite. "This is the live feed from inside," he said, lowering his voice. "I don't know how to tell you this, but you need to look." I turned to the screen, and the moment I saw what was happening inside that room, something inside me snapped. Emily, the woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with. And she wasn't alone. The screen flickered, and there she was, Emily. Her hair was still in the perfect wave she'd styled that morning, her dress draped elegantly over her shoulders. Except now, it was slightly off-center, a little too hastily adjusted. And next to her, his arm wrapped casually around her waist, was Chris, the best man, the groom's best friend, someone I had shaken hands with earlier that evening, had laughed with over drinks at the rehearsal dinner. A dull ringing filled my ears as I watched Emily smile at him. The way she tilted her head, just slightly, when he whispered in her ear. It was the kind of gesture that had once been reserved for me. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. The body language, the familiarity, the way Chris's hand slid down the small of her back, it told me everything. The venue employee cleared his throat. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but the security team noticed him slip in here a little while ago. Figured you should be the one to, I cut him off, my voice tight. Thanks. He nodded, then took a cautious step back. What do you want to do? That was the question, wasn't it? I could storm in there, make a scene, tear apart the illusion right now. But what would that accomplish? Shock? Anger? Maybe a few gasps from whoever happened to overhear? No, that wasn't enough. Not for this. Emily had been lying to my face, sneaking around behind my back, and doing it in the middle of her sister's wedding of all places. That wasn't a mistake. That was arrogance. That was the assumption that I would never find out, or worse, that I wouldn't do anything if I did. I forced my hands to unclench, inhaling through my nose. Do you have access to this footage? The employee blinked. Yeah, we have it on file. Why? I turned to face him, my mind already working. I want a copy, and I need you to do something for me. He hesitated. Depends on what it is. I gave him a tight smile. Nothing illegal. Just make sure that when I give you the signal, this plays for the entire wedding party. His eyes widened. The whole. Everyone, I confirmed. I'll handle the timing. He looked uncertain, but after a moment he nodded. Okay, I'll set it up. I turned back to the screen, watching as Emily laughed at something Chris said, her fingers grazing his wrist. My jaw tightened, but I didn't look away. I wanted to remember this. I wanted to hold onto the cold, sharp clarity of betrayal, to let it burn away any lingering doubt or love that might have softened my resolve. Then, without another word, I walked away. Back in the reception hall, the celebration was in full swing. The bride and groom danced in the center of the floor, her dress shimmering under the golden lights. Guests were laughing, clinking glasses, toasting to a future built on love and commitment. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spotted Emily's parents chatting with distant relatives, oblivious. I could see the best man's empty chair near the groom, his absence unnoticed in the sea of conversation. And then there was the DJ booth, the perfect vantage point for what was about to unfold. I signaled the venue employee, who gave me a discreet nod. Then, I picked up a champagne flute from a passing waiter and tapped my fork against the glass. The sound rang out, cutting through the music. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying through the room, smooth and controlled. "If I could have your attention for just a moment." The room quieted, all eyes turning toward me. Emily had just re-entered the hall, her smile bright, her steps confident. She had no idea. I wanted to take a moment to celebrate something truly special tonight, I continued. A reminder of what weddings are really about. Trust, loyalty, honesty. I let my gaze sweep across the room, pausing just long enough to see the slight confusion flicker across Emily's face. And with that in mind, I said, raising my glass, I'd like to share something with all of you. Something that I think really embodies the spirit of love and commitment. I nodded to the DJ. The projector screen behind me flickered to life. And then, the room fell into stunned silence. The silence was suffocating. The only sound in the massive reception hall was the hum of the projector, the flickering glow casting an eerie light over the stunned faces in the crowd. My heart pounded in my chest, not from nerves, but from the satisfaction of watching the perfect illusion Emily had built come crashing down. On the screen, there she was, her dress slightly askew, her hair tousled in a way that had nothing to do with dancing. And next to her, Chris, the best man, the supposed loyal friend of the groom. The room collectively held its breath as the footage played. A painfully clear image of Emily whispering something into Chris's ear, her lips brushing against his cheek before she pulled him into the bridal suite. The timestamp in the corner of the screen confirmed what I already knew. Gasps rippled through the guests. Someone dropped their glass, the sharp shatter punctuating the tension. The bride, Emily's sister, stood frozen near the dance floor, her hands clutched at her chest, her expression a mix of horror and disbelief. The groom looked like he'd been punched in the stomach, his eyes darting between the screen and his so-called best man's empty seat. And then the sound kicked in. "Are you sure no one saw us?" Chris's voice was low, smug, too confident. Emily laughed softly. "Relax. Everyone's too busy drinking and dancing. Besides, Mark won't suspect a thing." A murmur spread through the crowd, a mixture of whispers and scandalized exclamations. I didn't take my eyes off Emily. She was frozen in place, her face pale, her body stiff. Her eyes flicked to me, desperation creeping in. "Mark," she started, her voice unsteady. I raised a hand, cutting her off. "No, don't." Not now. The screen cut to black, leaving the room in a stunned silence. I let it stretch, let the weight of her betrayal settle over everyone. Then, I took a slow sip of my champagne, savoring the way the bubbles burned down my throat before setting the glass down with a deliberate clink. Well, I said, my voice carrying through the hushed room. I'd say that was quite the performance, wouldn't you? The murmurs grew louder, guests exchanging shocked glances, some looking at Emily with open disgust, others too stunned to react. Emily's mother stepped forward, her voice shaking. Emily, please tell me this isn't true. Emily's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time in our entire marriage, she had nothing to say. The bride finally snapped out of her trance, turning to Emily with wide, furious eyes. Are you kidding me? On my wedding day? The groom wasn't as loud, but the way his fists clenched at his sides told me everything I needed to know. Chris was nowhere to be found. Coward. I exhaled slowly and reached into my pocket, pulling out the one thing I had been waiting to deliver. A small envelope. I walked toward Emily, and she took a hesitant step back, her hands trembling. Don't worry, I said, my tone colder than even I expected. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to make a scene. I extended the envelope to her. I just want to give you this. She swallowed hard before taking it, her fingers barely brushing against mine as she did. She glanced down at the envelope, flipping it over in her hands, her breath shaky. What is this? I tilted my head slightly. Divorce papers. The room went silent again. This time, the reaction was more subdued. A few gasps, a murmur of understanding. Emily blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what was happening. Mark, she whispered. Please, can we just know? I cut in, my voice sharp. We can't just anything, Emily. You made your choice. You thought you could get away with it. You thought I was stupid enough not to notice. She opened her mouth again, but I wasn't interested in anything she had to say. I turned back to the stunned guests, raising my glass one more time. A toast, I said, my voice steady. To love, loyalty, and knowing when to walk away. Then, without another word, I turned on my heel and walked out of the reception hall. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. No more lies. No more wondering. The night air hit me like a rush of cold clarity as I stepped outside the reception hall. The muffled chaos behind me, the gasps, the whispers, the inevitable fallout was no longer my concern. My pulse had settled, my breathing even. I had done what I came to do. Now I just had to walk away. But of course, Emily wouldn't let that happen so easily. Mark, her voice rang out behind me, sharp and desperate. The clicking of her heels echoed against the pavement as she hurried to catch up. Mark, please. Stop. I didn't. I kept walking, my steps steady, purposeful. Would you just listen to me? She pleaded, grabbing my arm. I stopped then, not out of sympathy, but because I wanted to see just how far she'd go with whatever excuse she was about to throw my way. I turned slowly, meeting her wide, frantic eyes. Go ahead, I said, my voice calm. Explain yourself. Emily swallowed hard, glancing back at the doors of the venue like she wished she could just rewind the night, erase the evidence, rewrite the ending. It's not what you think, she finally managed. I laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. That's your opening line? After I just played security footage of you sneaking into a room with Chris in front of 200 people, that's what you're going with? Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. It was a mistake. Oh, I agree, I said. The mistake was thinking you wouldn't get caught. Mark, I wasn't. Stop. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Just stop. I don't need to hear whatever lie you're scrambling to come up with. Not anymore. She bit her lip, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she tried to formulate a response. But there was nothing she could say. Not this time. The door behind us burst open, and her sister stormed out, her wedding dress dragging against the concrete. I swear to God, Emily, if you don't leave right now, I will personally throw you into the street. Emily whirled around. Lisa, please. Lisa pointed a trembling finger at her. You did this at my wedding? You ruined my night because you couldn't keep it together for one single day? Her voice cracked, but it wasn't with sadness. It was rage. Pure, unfiltered fury. I didn't mean. You didn't mean to what? Lisa snapped. Didn't mean to get caught? Didn't mean to humiliate your husband in front of our entire family? Didn't mean to make my wedding all about you? Emily's mouth opened and closed, her face twisting in frustration. She looked at me again, as if I was supposed to step in and defend her. But I didn't. Lisa, I said, my voice calm, she's not your problem anymore. She's mine for a little while longer anyway. Lisa exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over her face. I can't believe you, Emily. Her voice was quieter now, but no less cutting. I really can't. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back inside, the heavy door slamming shut behind her. Emily stood frozen, shaking slightly, her eyes darting between me and the door. Mark, she tried again, her voice softer, almost pleading. I pulled my car keys from my pocket. We're done, Emily. Her breath hitched. You don't mean that. I laughed again, shaking my head. You really don't get it, do you? I mean every single word. Her eyes filled with something, fear, regret, maybe just the realization that she had finally pushed too far. What am I supposed to do? I unlocked my car. Figure it out. Then I got in, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. The silence in the house was different now. Before, it had been comforting, a quiet refuge after long days. Now it was thick, suffocating, pressing in from all sides. I had thrown Emily out that night at the wedding. Or, more accurately, she had thrown herself out. She knew better than to try and follow me home, not after the way I walked away. But that didn't mean she hadn't been trying to get back in. My phone had been lighting up nonstop for the past 24 hours. Calls, texts, voicemails. I hadn't listened to a single one. I didn't need to. I already knew what she would say. Excuses. Please. Apologies that didn't mean a thing. A knock at the door snapped me out of my thoughts. I stared at it for a second, debating whether I even wanted to entertain whatever conversation was about to happen. I already knew it was her. Mark, please, came her voice, muffled but urgent through the door. Just talk to me. I took a slow breath before unlocking it and pulling it open. Emily stood there, makeup smudged, eyes red. She had been crying, but I couldn't bring myself to care. She had a bag slung over her shoulder, and for a second, I thought she was stupid enough to think I'd let her move back in. You need to go, I said, my voice even. She shook her head quickly. No, we need to talk. I need to explain. I let out a sharp laugh. Explain? You mean lie to me some more? You've been doing that for months, Emily. Why stop now? Her eyes darted past me into the house. Can I just come inside? No. She swallowed hard, nodding slightly, like she was trying to keep herself composed. Mark, I swear to you, I never meant for any of this to happen. Right, I said, crossing my arms. It just happened. You just tripped and fell into another man's arms in the middle of your sister's wedding? That's the story you're going with? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't move. I didn't reach for her, didn't offer any sympathy. I made a mistake, she whispered. No, I said, shaking my head. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the store. A mistake is sending a text to the wrong person. What you did, that was a choice. Her lips trembled, but I could see the frustration bubbling under the surface. She had expected me to crack by now, to let her in, to let her cry on my shoulder, to hear her out. But I didn't. I was drunk, she tried. Not an excuse. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking clearly enough to sneak off with him. She took a shaky breath. Do you really just want to throw everything away? I stared at her for a long moment. Emily, you threw it away the second you let him touch you. Her breath hitched, and she reached out like she wanted to grab my hand, but I stepped back. Please, she whispered. Can we try to fix this? I tilted my head slightly. Fix it? And how exactly do you think we do that? You think I can just forget what I saw? Pretend it didn't happen? Walk back into a room full of people who watch me expose you and act like my wife didn't humiliate me in front of them? She looked down, biting her lip. I love you, Mark. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. No, you love the comfort I gave you. You love the security, the convenience. But you didn't love me, Emily. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. Her shoulders slumped, the weight of reality finally pressing down on her. So that's it? She asked, voice small. That's it, I confirmed. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't feel anything. No guilt. No regret. Just finality. I stepped back inside and gripped the edge of the door. Goodbye, Emily. Then I shut it in her face. I didn't wait to hear if she knocked again. Didn't check to see if she stood there crying or stormed off in anger. I locked the door, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. The days after I shut the door on Emily were strangely quiet. No more frantic knocks, no more desperate calls flooding my phone. For the first time in years, I had peace. But peace didn't mean closure. It didn't mean everything was settled. There was still unfinished business, things that needed to be taken care of, things I refused to let her walk away from unscathed. I spent the morning gathering everything I needed. Bank statements, documents, emails, everything that ensured Emily wouldn't take a cent more than she deserved. I wasn't about to let her walk away with my money, my house, or my dignity. My lawyer, Adam, sat across from me in his office, flipping through the thick folder I had handed him. "You've been busy," he muttered, scanning the pages. "I want this done quickly," I said, leaning back in the chair. "I don't want drawn-out arguments. She gets nothing more than what's fair. Nothing extra. No negotiations." Adam nodded, adjusting his glasses. "Given the circumstances, I don't see a judge being too sympathetic to her. The public nature of the affair works in your favor. She humiliated you at a wedding, Mark. That's not something people forget." "Good," I said, exhaling slowly. "I want the papers served immediately." Adam smirked slightly. "Already ahead of you. She'll have them by tonight." I left the office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Emily had tried to play me for a fool, but I wasn't going to let her win. Not in this. Not ever. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed with a text from Adam. "She has them. Didn't take it well." I wasn't surprised. Emily had spent years believing she could talk her way out of anything, that she could manipulate me into forgiving her mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice, a deliberate one. And now she was going to face the consequences. It wasn't long before the messages started coming in again. At first, they were calm. "Mark, please, can we talk?" Then, "I don't understand why you're doing this." That one made me laugh, as if she had no idea, as if she hadn't completely destroyed everything we built. Then the real Emily started to come through. "You can't just throw this all away," followed by "You're being so cruel right now." And then, finally, "You'll regret this, Mark." I stared at my phone for a long moment before shutting it off. I wasn't playing this game. Later that night, I heard tires screech into my driveway. A moment later, furious knocking rattled my front door. I sighed, setting my drink down before opening it. Emily stood there, her face streaked with tears, divorce papers clenched in her fist. "You can't be serious," she spat. I crossed my arms. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Her lip curled. "You're throwing away years of marriage over one mistake?" "Not a mistake," I said coldly. "A choice." She let out a bitter laugh. "Fine. If you want to do this, let's do this. But you don't get to make me the villain here." "You are the villain here, Emily," I said, stepping closer. "You lied. You betrayed me. You let me be humiliated in front of everyone we know. And now, you want to stand here and act like I'm the bad guy for refusing to tolerate it?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't let them shake me. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. I scoffed. "That's the thing, Emily. You never meant for anything, but you did it anyway. And now, you have to live with that." She shook her head, stepping back. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, my voice firm. "I won't." Then I shut the door in her face. For the first time in years, I wasn't the fool in this marriage. And I never would be again. The fallout came swiftly. The morning after I shut the door on Emily, my phone buzzed with messages from mutual friends, some demanding explanations, others offering support. My inbox filled with news from Adam, my lawyer, updating me on Emily's reaction to the divorce proceedings. She wasn't taking it well. Adam's email was brief. "She's contesting the terms. Wants a bigger share? Claims she deserves more." I smirked at my screen. Of course she did. A woman who had spent years lying, manipulating, and ultimately betraying me wasn't about to walk away quietly. But she didn't realize something. I had spent the past few months preparing for this exact moment. By the afternoon, Emily had gone full-scale damage control. Mutual acquaintances started reaching out, telling me she was spinning the narrative. Mark is overreacting. It was just a mistake. He's being cruel. Then came the real strategy. She called my family. My sister, Rachel, rang me up first. Mark, she's saying you're cutting her off with nothing. She's telling everyone you're trying to ruin her life. I exhaled sharply. She ruined her own life, Rachel. I'm just refusing to pay for it. Yeah, well, she's crying to Mom too, Rachel warned. Sure enough, an hour later, my mother's name lit up my screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but thought better of it. Mom, don't start, I said as soon as I picked up. Mark, she sighed. I'm not taking sides, but are you sure you want to handle this so publicly? She didn't have a problem making a fool out of me in public, I said coolly. Two wrongs don't make a right, she said. Yeah, well, they make things even, I muttered before ending the call. By the time the evening rolled around, I had ignored at least a dozen more messages from Emily. She was alternating between pleading and threatening, between begging me to talk and warning me I'd regret humiliating her. Then, finally, she made her last move. A car pulled into my driveway. I didn't need to look out the window to know it was her. The pounding on my door was familiar now, a desperate rhythm against the wood. I let her knock, let her stand outside long enough to stew in her own mess. When I finally opened the door, I leaned against the frame, arms crossed. Mark, she started, her voice shaking. No, I said, I'm not interested. You don't even know what I was going to say. I sighed. Let me guess. You're sorry. You want to fix this. You made a mistake, but you still love me. Did I miss anything? Her eyes flashed with something, anger, maybe, or panic. I don't deserve this. I laughed. Oh, Emily, you deserve every single part of this. She swallowed hard, shifting tactics. I was confused. Things between us haven't been perfect. You've been distant, and I distant. I cut her off. You cheated on me in a bridal suite at your own sister's wedding, Emily. That wasn't confusion. That was a choice. Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't move me. Not anymore. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. You lost me the moment you walked into that room with him. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, she looked down, hands clenched at her sides. You'll regret this, she muttered. I smiled, stepping back into my house. No, Emily. You will. Then I closed the door. The legal battle began the moment I shut the door in Emily's face. The next morning, Adam called me. She's fighting everything, Mark. Claims she was emotionally distressed and that your actions were cruel and humiliating. I chuckled bitterly. You mean exposing her for what she is? That was just honesty. Yeah, well, her lawyer is playing the victim card hard. She's pushing for a larger settlement. Claims she contributed equally to the marriage. She contributed equally? I repeated, scoffing. Was that before or after she hooked up with the best man at her sister's wedding? Doesn't matter, Adam said. We're dealing with strategy now. Do you want to play nice? Or do you want to make sure she gets exactly what she deserves? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the divorce papers already drafted on my desk. I want her to leave with nothing. Emily had spent years pretending. Pretending to be loyal, pretending to love me, pretending that I was the only man in her life. Now I was done pretending. The first court hearing was scheduled 2 weeks later. She walked in with her lawyer, dressed in an outfit designed to make her look as pitiful as possible. Gone was the confident woman who had strutted into that bridal suite behind my back. Now, she played the part of the devastated wife, eyes wide, hands folded in her lap. Her lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client was the victim of public humiliation at the hands of her husband. She acknowledges mistakes were made, but argues that the financial settlement should reflect both parties' contributions to the marriage. Adam leaned forward. Mistakes? She was caught in the act, Your Honor. My client has substantial evidence proving her infidelity. We request that all joint assets remain with my client, and that misses. Dawson received nothing beyond what was originally agreed upon in the prenup. Her lawyer hesitated for half a second before speaking. The prenup was signed under duress. Emily was pressured into it. I clenched my jaw, but Adam didn't flinch. We have witnesses, including her own family members, who can confirm she signed willingly. If necessary, we'll depose them. The judge looked over the documents, flipping through pages. After a long moment, he adjusted his glasses and looked at Emily. Mrs. Dawson, given the clear evidence of marital misconduct and the legally binding prenuptial agreement, I see no reason to award you additional assets beyond the original terms. Emily's face paled. Her lawyer opened his mouth as if to argue, but the judge held up a hand. My ruling is final. I caught the moment the reality of her situation hit. She was leaving this marriage with nothing. No lavish settlement, no house, no access to my accounts. For once, she had to face the consequences of her actions. When the hearing ended, Emily stormed up to me in the hallway, her perfect composure cracking. "You did this to me," she hissed. I met her gaze, calm and unmoved. "No, Emily. You did this to yourself." Emily showed up at my door a week after the final ruling. I didn't have to open it to know it was her. The frantic knocking, the desperate energy, it was all predictable. I debated ignoring her, but I wasn't in the mood for games. I pulled the door open and leaned against the frame. "What do you want, Emily?" Her eyes were puffy, her hair not as perfectly styled as usual. She clutched the lapels of her designer coat, like it was the last expensive thing she had left. "We need to talk." I smirked. "We really don't." She stepped forward as if I'd actually let her inside. "Mark, come on. This doesn't have to be the way things end." I was confused. I made mistakes, but I held up a hand. "Stop. Just stop. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices." Repeatedly, deliberately. Her expression wavered, and for a moment, I thought she might actually try tears. Instead, she squared her shoulders. "You humiliated me, Mark." I let out a short laugh. "Humiliated you? You did that all on your own. I just made sure the people who deserve to know the truth saw it firsthand." "You think you're so righteous," she snapped. "Like you're above all this. You just wanted revenge." "You're right. I did," I said easily. "And I got it." Her mouth opened and closed before she settled on another approach. "We had years together. You can't tell me none of it mattered. It mattered. That's why your betrayal meant something. But I'm not wasting another second of my life on you." Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "So, that's it? You're just throwing me away?" I tilted my head. "No, Emily. You threw this away the moment you walked into that bridal suite with him." She exhaled sharply, as if trying to keep herself from screaming. "I don't have anywhere to go. Not my problem." She scoffed, shaking her head. "You used to be kind, Mark. You used to care." I let my gaze drift over her, taking in the woman I had once trusted with everything. "Yeah, well, I used to think you were worth it." Her jaw tightened, and for a second, I thought she might slap me. Instead, she stepped back, her breath unsteady. "You'll regret this." I smiled. "No, I really won't." I shut the door in her face, locking it for good measure. I stood there for a moment, listening as her footsteps retreated down the walkway. For the first time in a long time, I felt nothing but peace. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.